Amen. Thank you, Shane. So I thought that, well, first of all, again, thank you, Frank, for being here. We appreciate it very much. It was the desire of the class from the very beginning that this course began that we connect with Frank and on a personal level to find out how you're doing. And then as the class sort of progressed and we started comparing leadership styles in different places and different cultures, and then the Hofstede's dimensions. We kept thinking about you and the fact that you were here leading and have been in other places leading also cross culturally. So I thought perhaps you could just start with a personal update, Frank, and we all love you and miss you, and so we want to know what it's like to come home, and how did the family and the church received you, and what might be your new roles there in Suriname.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, and it's good to see all of you and hear your voices. It's been good. Yes, good to have this opportunity. So we came back last year around, let's say, the 1st of June. And we thought at first that within a month we would be able to relocate to our new place. We had our goods coming from the US and they arrived on time. Towards the end of June, they were there. So it was good. We were in the country at that time and we were able to take them out. Everything arrived safely, thank God. And we put them in storage somewhere. And we worked on our house, but things didn't go as we planned. And that's normal here with some people. And as I said, just last week we were able to finally move in, even though we are not finished with everything yet, and finally take some of our stuff out of the storage. And of course, we brought some stuff with us, food stuff that were in boxes. And guess what happened? Expired. So some of them were expired. You're not able to use them. So, but other things are there. But we are thankful that we are finally here. We've been involved in ministry, the church, our assemblies here received us very, very well. We have assemblies in the city, Paramaribo, and two places actually here, and then in the eastern part of the country, two places, and then towards the south, also in two places we have meeting, and a new one is starting towards the west. And what we did in our first months was to just visit each one of them another Sunday. So we were traveling, visiting all of them. This week we are here, next week we are there, the week after we are there. We did that up to Christmas. Even in January we did it as well. And then we decided to focus on one particular location. We also start with a training program, a Bible training program for the leaders in our assemblies. We realized there is a need for more training. And we did that, started that actually. We were in the eastern part of the country where I had a session on the Bible, how the Bible came to us, and the importance of the Bible. And it was while we were there, we got the message of Corona. And then, immediately they said you were not allowed to have more than 100 people in one place. And, and the list goes on and on and on and on. But it was a good session. I had about 100 people in that session, and they were our church leaders, but mostly church leaders from other churches and members that came. to the session, and the idea is that we will continue this once we have the opportunity to do that. So it's been good. I have the opportunity to minister to the churches and leaders. I also did a few training sessions on leadership, but that was for political parties. In Suriname, we have a multi-party system. So it's not just Republicans and Democrats, but we have, like, if I have people, I start a political party, we can join the election, you know. And if I win, I can make it to parliament, the assembly, or who knows, maybe I can become the president, you know. So that's the system that we have. And I was able to do a session on leadership for the leaders of different political parties. I would say most of them, except for two, like the ruling party didn't come back to me, even though they said, yeah, you know, we would love for you to do a session, and then they never came back. And then another one, let's say the two biggest parties, they never invited us, but the others did. And we had excellent meetings on leadership. And I discussed some of the things that I taught in cross-cultural leadership in the session. There were 3 hour seminars, so I split them in 3 blocks. And we tried to see what kind of leadership is necessary for Suriname at this time, you know, moving towards the election. My question to them was, if the people were to elect you to a position of leadership in the country, what would you do? You know, what is it? What are the needs of the country in your, you know, the way you see things, and how would you address them? And then, you know, I came up with a proposal, a possible way that we can address issues. Uh, so, you know, I've been involved with that. And then normally, like in the morning hours, I'm working with a Bible translation organization called the Word for the World. And I'm overseeing the training program. So the Word for the World has Bible translation projects going on at the moment in 110 languages in over 30 countries. And the translators, while they are working, they receive training. So, and then I'm overseeing the training program, help. There was a program already. So at the moment, we are going through a revision of the program, update the program, and then trying to find people to help teach the courses. So it's a good thing. And then I'm working with the teachers, some of them in other parts of the country. I work a lot with a group from India, some of the translators with from India. So those are some of the things, and of course, spending time with my dad, visit him regularly, and with other family. So that's our 10 weeks in a nutshell, or 10 months back in a nutshell. Yeah. Not sure if it's been clear or whether there are questions.
Any questions from the class?
So, Dr. Jabini, it's really good to hear from you. I took cross-cultural adjustment with you, and I was wondering, how has it, I know like this is going back to your home country, but even in going back to your home country with culture, you know how like it changes and you adapt. So I was wondering if you had experienced like cross-cultural adjusting going back home.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We anticipated that, and that's why I agree at first to work with a translation agency, not jump into what's going on in Suriname immediately, but work more internationally. But even though I expected that, it was more than I thought it would be. You know, I've been out of the country for more than 12 years. and I had to adjust to quite a few things in the country. Some of them I knew, but I have not experienced them for 12 years. And then coming back, it's just, it was a struggle. At first, in Suriname, when you're in the country, you have to be registered in a government registration. And what it is, I have to go there, give them my passport, prove that I live overseas, and then they will put me in the books. And we did that like for 3 or 4 days. You would go, they say, oh, no, you need a stamp from this person. And then you have to go there and get it there. I'm sorry, he's not at work today. So please come back tomorrow. And then you'll go back tomorrow. Oh, no, it's not this department. You have to go to the other department. So it's like, frustrated. All right. But what would have happened in one day took us like, because it was just before a weekend, this almost a week to get that done. And with other things as well, you make arrangements with people to do something and then it won't happen on time. Yes, it was that there were some issues with adjustment. At first everybody was excited that we are back, and they want us to do like everything. You have to preach in this week in our church, and you preach in this week in our church, and then you realize, I'm just one person. I cannot be everywhere at the same time. And then, of course, the food, getting back to Surinamese food, and then suddenly you realize, wait a minute, uh, those things that I enjoyed in the US are not here. Like I miss some of the fruits. I want like the apple, and we don't grow them here, so it's all import if we want them. And uh, some other stuff we can have them here. Like even recently when we moved, I thought, all right, so these guys will come in. Oh, if we were in the US, we could have ordered pizza for them. But ordering pizza here is possible, but it is not cheap. Pizza is expensive. So yes, we have experienced a lot of that. We had anticipated that, but it was much more. And I think I'm still going through some of those things as well. The bureaucracy, and then in some places, just the way people handle things, where I think it can be done like today, and they still tell you come back tomorrow, just like that, as if I don't have anything else to do. So yes, I've had some struggles. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that does. It's fascinating that adjusting still has to happen even when you're going back home. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, on that same subject of coming in and finding that you have changed and some of your expectations have been modified. I'm curious about how people there perceive you. Are you little Frank who's finally come home? The prodigal son has returned? Are you a prophet who is probably not going to be heard in his own home? What are you, a celebrity in the assemblies? I mean, what's the identity of Dr. Frank Jabini now that he's come home?
He's a gringo now.
I think it's a mixture of all of the above. Let me start with one that has been, well, not so long ago, a challenge. I was asked by the university to help the university in Suriname. We have one university to help with one of the departments. It's a new department and it's been struggling. So I was asked to help, in the developing the curriculum and work on a few things for them. And I was invited by the board of the university, and they are the highest authority. The department approved that I would come, the board approved that I would come, but there was one little department that should make a recommendation. And for some reason, they did not make the recommendation. And at first they said, I'm not qualified. I don't have the qualification required to do that. Uh, and then I submitted all my documents. The board, the chairman met with me and we went through everything. He said, I don't know why they are saying that everything is here. And then after that, they said, no, I have to go and bring my qualifications, my degrees to a local authority so that it can be established that I do have those qualifications. And I went there, they say, well, your qualification are foreign qualification. We don't do foreign qualifications. All right. Okay. What's next? Well, one thing was that when I was going to the US, a foreign authority evaluated my qualification. Would you accept that? Yes, if that's there, of course. So Lisa was so gracious to send me what the document that she had. I give it to them. And then they said, all right, no, you can start February 1st. It's okay. And then after that, somebody came and say, we still have questions. So what happened is, that's the way I interpret it afterwards, is that some people felt threatened, that if I were to be there, it would be a challenge for them in whatever way. Even though that was not my agenda, I told them I'm not here to take over anybody's job. But of course, some people felt threatened. So that was one that was not a good thing. It was really, I felt like this is not right. But at the same time, as a Christian, I accept that as being not the people did that, but the Lord said, no, I don't want you to be there. And I accepted that. There are other places where uh, we are welcome in churches. We've had invitation from not just assemblies. We have, when I first came in November, the Moravian Church, the second, I think the largest the Protestant church in the country. They had a leaders conference, a weekend with their leaders, and I was invited to be the speaker for the pastors meeting there, which I did. There is a tradition here with academic institutions. At the beginning of the year, there is a lecture, where you present a subject. And I was invited to do it for the seminary, to be the speaker. Uh, and they invited me, say, let's sit, let's talk. What can you do for us in the months to come? And of course, speaking at other churches as well. But there are others who didn't like us being here because it's like a challenge to them. There's another thing that happened.
Great. Thank you very much. Wow, that's great. So let's talk about this. This course is called Cross-Cultural Leadership, and so let's talk about that for a minute. You've been a leader in many contexts, in many cross-cultural contexts. What are some of the lessons that you've learned about leadership as coming as a cultural outsider, in South Africa, in the US, maybe in the Netherlands or in other places where you've had leadership roles, but are a cultural outsider? What are some of those lessons that you've learned about leadership?
Hmm. I've learned a lot. I think that one of the key things is this, and that's something I like to emphasize. The fact that you are not a good leader in one context doesn't mean you are not a good leader, because contexts are different. It's possible that I serve in South Africa and I appear to be a failure. But in Congo, I will be an excellent leader. So it's always good to take your context into consideration. Context is important. It tells us the kind of leader, the kind of personality, the kind of skills that we need to serve somewhere. So I think that's a good lesson. You may not be a leader in one context, but in another one, you are an excellent leader.
Mm,
Uh,
powerful.
another thing is that, especially for us as Christians, In some contexts, you will be more than a Christian leader or a church leader. Like, I used that example recently. But in other contexts where I was as a church leader, people from the secular people will come to me and they want me to address their problem that they have. If you are in a village setting, there is an issue in the village, they will come and ask your advice. How should we do this? And these guys are not Christians. So it will be, you will have to serve as more than a pastor, so to speak, to your local small congregation. You will be out there for the community. You will be serving your community as a leader. They will come to you and they will ask questions that you don't know how to answer. I remember a case where someone came and said, you are a servant of the Lord. My brother is sick. Do something. What should I do? Do you know something that can be done? Say, I'm not a doctor, but they don't want to hear that. You are a leader. What should we do? What can be done? Pray, recommend a medicine, do something. So you will have to be more than that. On a theological basis, some of the things that I think I've learned is that first and foremost, my relationship with God is critical. Is as a leader, I'm called to serve God no matter where the context is, to worship Him, to love Him, and to do what He wants me to do. That's the first and foremost thing. But secondly, as important, is to love the people that I'll be working with. They are different. Some of them may not be even believers. Some of them may even be against me. But one thing that has been a great blessing to me, and that's why I think for us in the intercultural context, theology for us does not start in Genesis chapter 3 when sin came into the world. For some people, that's where we start. Genesis 3. There was sin, and then, or God made everything well, and then there was sin, and then, Jesus came, and so on. Yes, but we go back and say, no, it starts in Genesis 1, where we see that God created man in his own image. And that's not just true for Christians, it's also true for the Hindu, the Buddhists, even though they don't want to serve him. But these people are created by this Almighty God that we serve, and they are precious in his sight. So love God, love the people that we are working with, and then the third thing would be to have a vision, to know where I'm going. If God blesses me, where will I be in 5 to 10 years? And in an intercultural context, it means that you may not be in that place where you are at the moment anymore. So from day one, it would be good to empower people to take over from you. Because we know the vision is there. God want to do something. We know where God is taking us to. And I may not be there in 5 years anymore. What will happen to this, what God is doing? And empower people, equip them. Ephesians 4, 11, 12. God gave us as people to equip the saints for the work of ministry, no matter the context where we are, no matter the culture, we should be doing that. And then I would say, finally, is to always be a student of the culture, to always be a learner in the new culture. There is something that you can learn, and your life will be enriched. So be open to have your life enriched, change, challenge. It's a good thing. And you will realize when you're back, you don't fit in your own culture anymore. And people feel like you're strange, but somehow you've been enriched. It's like I've learned a couple of things, and I know a few things that are different than my culture. So that would be it in a nutshell. I can be more specific, but for now, I think that's one is what I think.
That's fantastic, Frank. I don't know if anybody has a comment or a question so far on what they've heard.
Before they go, may I take a quick restroom break?
Yep, go for
Okay. Yeah, okay. I'll be back.
I missed some already.
it. So, anything we should be asking Frank when he comes back? Any thoughts on the direction of our conversation? Here's what I've got in store. How has cross-cultural leadership changed you is the next question, and then final advice. But in a sense, he's already answered some of these things. It would just be an opportunity to elaborate. I was also thinking of, let me show you this screen. I was also thinking of presenting him this screen here and asking him to comment on just his thoughts on what it was like.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So we need to talk to him about the Hofstede questions, right? What do you think? Right? And then we need to write about it and turn it in?
Yes. So can you remind us of that?
What do you mean I just did?
Wow. Okay, so I'm going to interpret the question.
Thank you.
We have an assignment that's an interview with a leader, and we were talking about interviewing Dr. Jabini. Does this session count, or are we going to program something?
No, this session does count, and thank you for that. The session does count, and so you've got some specific questions.
We were working on them. We tried to meet yesterday, but several people could not meet, and so we are
Cough, cough.
so the people who, if you know who you were, you know who you were.
How does Cullen equal several people? I'm confused. You guys could have met without me.
Colin is excused because he was in his birthday, but there were a couple others who could not make it, so that's fine. Or did not answer in the group chat, but it's fine. We just have to hook up for a time and make it work whenever that time comes. We want to come up with around 5 to 7 questions for each of the Hofstede. I think that will be a fairly good number, 3 to 5, around 5 questions. That would be ideal. But
what if I already have my question? Can I just ask?
Listen, if you're ready to roll,
yeah,
we've got a half hour still, and Frank could probably give us a little bit more if we went over. So I would be okay to pausing what I was thinking of doing at this point and just moving ahead with your questions.
I'm back.
Great. All right. So is everyone okay with the last piece of advice that we had?
I had a quick question before we continue.
Yeah.
So Dr. Beanie was just sharing. He shared 3 things. I missed the first one. The middle one was like had to do with theology, loving people, loving God because we're in the image, and made in the image of God. And then the last one was have a vision. What was the first thing?
The first thing was our relationship with God, where we love Him, we fear Him, we know Him, serve Him, worship Him, glorify Him. So the focus is first and foremost God. And then secondly, we go to the people. And then the third one was actually the ministry.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So, Frank, students have some questions for you.
Okay.
And I'm sorry that I did not anticipate this yesterday when I sent you just list of things, but I think you've addressed all the things that I had really asked about
Okay.
in the course of your story. So in order to fulfill an assignment, students have just a number of questions.
Okay.
So fire away, young people.
Oh, wow. No question. Well, thank you.
I'll start with one. So we were looking at the we've been really appreciating Hofstede's 6, was it 5 or was it 6 cultural dimensions? So yeah, 6. So I think we're going to go through a few questions about those.
Okay.
The one I was thinking of just now is, how do you practice servant leadership in a high power distance society? Because I noticed that Suriname is a lot higher power distance than the US. Should you insist on saying that, you know, I'm a brother, don't treat me like, don't call me pastor, don't treat me like I'm better than you, or not? How do you handle that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think that what we can learn from these dimensions is that use them as a guideline. And even for us as Christians, when we are in a context, we should study the context very well. Servant leadership will work in some contexts very well. In others, it will be perceived as weakness. And people will not see you as a leader. You know, I think that's definitely applicable as well. So if I were to be in a high power distance culture, would I do the servant leadership? Yes, but in a different way. There is the story of a businessman in India. I'm not sure if you guys have that. I've used his example often. And in his case, the way he used that model, well, he changed things. He tried to change the culture by saying, no, I will become like the servant of the people, but not all the way to the bottom. He only served his employees and then encourage his employees to serve the people that they are working with. So in a sense, there's still a power distance between the people and the executive, but there are bridges for the people to still meet the CEO if they want to, but they have to go through the channels there. I think the encouragement that I would do is I normally tell people, if you are from a high power distance society and you are going to a low power distance, try to move towards their direction. And if you are from a low power distance society going to minister in a high power distance society, same thing, move towards their direction. I think there should be a balance somewhere in the middle. We should learn from the culture, but at the same time, we should challenge the culture as well in a positive way. Did that answer your question? And please feel free to disagree or share your perspective. I don't mind at all.
All right. Any other? I'm sure there's more questions.
Yeah.
I can go next.
Okay, Amanda.
Okay.
Go for it.
So looking at the Hofstede, like the comparison to United States to Suriname, it doesn't have indulgence, and so Suriname isn't a country that Suriname Suriname the country doesn't have the results on indulgence. So indulgence is like to enjoy the moment or material things or the way you indulge yourself as like a country. What do you think Suriname's indulgence would be?
Yeah, you are correct that Hofstede didn't include that when he did his research.
Mm-hmm.
What would I think Suriname would be? Uh, wow. I would guess we would be close to the US. You know, especially when it comes to things like food, we really enjoy ourselves. And that's why we struggle, what I shared earlier with the curfew, that because some people didn't follow the rules, we have to extend it 2 more weeks. So I would say definitely more than 50%.
Wow. Okay. Is there activities that you think the Suriname culture indulges themselves in?
Uh, yes, uh, we do have, like, when people are organizing dancing, it's something that they really uh, enjoy, both in a positive way and in a negative way. And some of it is like sensual dancing and all kind of things. That's like one way of going about doing that. We have drinking problem as well. People, and then drugs is another one. Uh, but we also have a culture. The other day we were talking about it, where there are some young men, they prefer to buy expensive clothes, very, very expensive, but they do not necessarily have a place to live. Instead of saving up the money to buy a property, a piece of land to do something, they would rather spend that money on very expensive brand model shoe and shirt and so on. So, those would be examples. On a side note, I grew up in that indulgence culture, especially the aspect that I share about the dancing and so on. I don't know if you've noticed, those of you who know me in the US, when we go to activities like wedding, people are dancing, you've never seen me dancing. Not because I'm against it, but because my culture, background, and the way we used to see dancing as a Christian, even as a Christian, I try to stay away from that. And it's not because it's bad, but because of what happened when people do that dancing here. Does that answer your question, Amanda?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
To further prod that question, with the indulgence thing and coming in your background as a Christian and seeing kind of a large part of the culture being indulgent and then seeing that not compatible with Christianity. Do you think that, and we were kind of having this discussion earlier in class with Mr. Hernandez, but do you think that indulgence in a society, in a culture, is more so related to sinful nature and should be not it's not a good thing for the culture? What would you say about something like that?
That's a good one. Um, you know, as Christian, I would accept the good things that God has given us from His hand with thanksgiving. Recognizing it is a blessing. I won't feel guilty at all. For example, when I live in the US and I could enjoy a good stay, go to a restaurant, with my wife and son, and we enjoy a good meal. I accept that with thanksgiving from the Lord's hand. So in itself, it's not bad that we have good things. I think the problem come when uh, we ignore God in it, and it becomes something of the, as you said, or sinfulness, abuse it because of our sinfulness. I think that's where the problem comes from. But in itself, blessings like that, material blessings, can be a great blessing that God gave us to enjoy with gratitude to Him, and praise and worship to Him. And we can even share it with others. But at the same time, we know where people will go after this and it will be a problem. So these riches are a good servant, but not a good master.
That's really good. That's a really cool perspective. Thank you.
You said that the young people would buy clothes instead of property. Do you think that reflects your like long-term orientation, or do you think that that's just like the young people are an outlier in that?
I think it can be a combination of both. It's a good thing you brought that long-term orientation, because even though Hofstede didn't include that here, some of our culture here and where I've seen that example a lot, they have a short-term orientation. We don't focus so much on what's ahead. Today is today. Let's enjoy life. If what's here, it's here, but you don't worry about the future. It's okay. Even with time, you don't worry about the time. Even if this class will go on and on and on, we're okay with that. No problem at all. So there is something about the long term or the short term orientation as well. And for some of it, I think it's maybe something else in the culture. It's a way of showing yourself, to be like an important person. So that can be it. I don't know what it is.
Thanks.
Yeah.
How does that short-term mentality affect ministry in Suriname?
Uh, hmm, that is a good one. How does it affect ministry in Suriname? Let me use one example. For example, I know that we have one of the major Protestant denomination here, for example. In the short-term orientation, they don't focus on the future so much. They will go back to the past and the glorious past and the important people that we have in our organization. So what happened is that organizations like that or ministries like that tend to tell people, how big we were in this country. We were at like 10,000 members. But at the same time, they don't realize that the number of people are dwindling in the church and that they are not focusing on where we are now and where we should be in the future. So having that say, it's been an amazing ministry the 20 or 30 years ago. That can be a problem for the future of any ministry because then we are not learning people where they are right now to do ministry now and the future. We want to take them back to the past, and it's not gonna happen. I mean, even our world right now, I'm predicting, I'm not Nostradamus, but I'm predicting our world will not be the same after Corona. So as leaders, we have to start thinking ahead. What will our world be next? And what are we going to do? Yeah.
So you would say, as maybe an indicator of a culture's um, long-term orientation, you could, like right now, you could say the cultures that
that are looking at the coronavirus and are saying, hey, we want to return to what we had. That's more of a short-term orientation for a culture. And then the cultures that are thinking about, all right, the world has changed. This is what it's going to look like after Corona. Those cultures would be long-term. Correct?
You know, Colin, I would agree with you. And let me add another thing there. And I'm not sure if you've seen that in the US as well, but among Christians here on Facebook pages and other social media, they share uh, videos and messages about how careful we should be, and that Microsoft, Bill Gates is doing something with a chip, and it is like the Antichrist, the 666 is coming, and the list go on and on about how we should be careful with this time that we are living in. Instead of start asking ourselves, look, the world is going to be changed anyway. What are we going to do? How are we going to address them? Allow me to just say something. I've been learning one thing with this Corona shutdown, no church meetings, is that we have to ask ourselves the critical question: what is the church? Is the church just what happens in a building on Sunday most of the time? Because for some people, they don't go to prayer meeting on Wednesdays or Bible study on Thursday or whatever day anymore. It's all about Sunday in the building. And during the week, there is no fellowship, nothing. And the question is that the church? What is Corona telling us about the church? Are we still a church with Corona, with lockdown, with no possibility of going to church on Sunday? Are we still the church? So that's something that we've been learning, at least for me. Yes, it is. I still have to find an answer for that.
Something else that I was wondering about is on the Hofstede graph. You've talked about this already a little bit, but uncertainty avoidance is really, really high, which I think that means that it's the highest thing on the chart, and that I think what that means is that like you guys in Suriname really don't care about uncertainty, and it's like whatever happens kind of thing. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's true. That would mostly be the case. And I think it's been a great blessing to the country, but it is also the biggest enemy. It is a blessing because even in bad times with bad political leaders, people have the impression, say, you know what, that's what we are doing right now. Change is coming, something is going to happen. And people will not go fighting and destroying the country. But as I said, it's also the challenge because of that people will take things too lightly when they shouldn't. So it is indeed uh, higher than other places. Yes.
Let me follow in with that. I don't know, Joel, if you could go back to the country comparison tab, if that's easy. So we were a little bit confused about this in our class time. Uncertainty avoidance, it says, is high, and based on the description, that means that people strongly want to avoid uncertainty. They want to be certain about things. That was very confusing when we saw that many South American countries and Latin American countries are rated high on that, even though the culture is just what you described. And also, it doesn't matter if people stay long for the meeting and if you don't have things planned out. But one thing that maybe I do see in Peru is that people understand that there's a need for a lot of laws, and the government tells you what to do. Now, they don't necessarily obey any of them, but they expect that. So that's kind of a little bit of the conversation that we've had about uncertainty avoidance. And I'm wondering if you have any clarifying comments for that, what that would mean and how you see that working out.
Yes. Hmm. You know, uncertainty avoidance, what this is, so when people are trying to avoid things that are not certain, right? For example, we know death is coming, but I want to protect myself. I make sure I have an insurance. Something happened on the road, we have a new law for that. So we don't want to have uncertainties. And for some cultures, they are low at that, trying to make sure things are not uncertain. And in other cultures, they are really, really high in that, in avoiding or living with uncertainties. The way the graph is, I'm not sure. I'll have to take a look at this if you allow me. Uh, let me skip this question for now. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to skip it and then check, see if I can go back in some notes that I had on Hofstede. Okay, wow. I don't see my Hofstede note here.
So I was wondering, is a go with the flow mentality sort of, so like that's what we see in Latin America, and this is something that is kind of an interesting thought, isn't it? Is adapting to going with the flow, is that a coping mechanism for uncertainty? So like people are uncertain and they want to have that uncertainty eliminated, so they end up going with the flow and adapting a lifestyle that is regulated, but it's not necessarily because they're wanting to be regulated. It's more they're just coping. Does that make sense? My observation.
I missed this. Say it again.
So like cultures that are high in uncertainty, but then they're also very go with the flowy and seem like they're just kind of whatever happens. Is that a mentality or a coping mechanism that people are like, I don't want to be uncertain, so I'm just going to go with the flow and cope with the uncertainty that way?
Right. So maybe, yeah, I don't know. So what happened here is that if let me try to interpret the graph, as it is here. The 92 there for Suriname in uncertainty avoidance. The way Hofstede interpret the uncertainty avoidance, if I'm not mistaken, would be how comfortable people are in an uncertain situation. So if the situation is uncertain, am I comfortable in that? Then I would say the 92 for Suriname would be yes. Even though I don't know, I'm okay with that. So I think that's the way they interpret it. So it is really high because I don't mind being in an uncertain situation, even though I don't know what the next regulation will be or what the next president will do or whatever. He didn't present a program. Let's all vote for the guy. It's okay. Whereas the other way, what he is saying about the US would not be comfortable in that situation. We want to make sure everything is, all the uncertainties are taken out as much as possible. Whereas the other one is high. If it's there, I don't care. I feel okay with that. And others don't feel okay. Those would be the lower one. I think that's how I would interpret his this graph. Would that make sense?
Mhm.
I think that certainly explains why Suriname would be high and the U.S. would be lower or in the middle. We struggled, I think, with the labels as a class. We struggle with the fact that it doesn't just say uncertainty coping, but uncertainty avoidance. So it seems like, people are off the charts very high in terms of their desire to avoid uncertainty. That's how we read it. But the way you're explaining it now makes more sense in terms of how Latin American countries got such high marks. But as I go back and look at the PowerPoints and the information that Hofstede provided, I'm still uncertain. I still have a high degree of uncertainty.
I was thinking about, if I can just jump in here with a question and a comment. I was thinking about what uncertainty avoidance looks like outside of daily life, because in daily life, that's also heavily influenced by the masculinity aspect of how driven a society is, and instead of how much they value the just the comfort and harmony, and like Suriname being low in masculinity shows that that feminine, I hate that tag, but that feminine side of more laid back, more pursuing harmony. And I think that that's more where all of the South American countries land, is low masculinity. But also was thinking, why would Hofstede give a high score to most Latin American countries and Spain? And I was thinking about it, and it has to do a lot of it, what I came up with, and I might be wrong with this, but when it comes to our spiritual life, or to the spiritual life, the traditions that you find in South America are very scared of death, per se, and or like idolatrize it in a way, because it's one of those few things that they're very uncertain of. So they want to make sure that everything's taken care of for their elders, for how they bury. So you have the Mexico Day of the Dead, and then you have the cult of Santa Muerte, and then you have all of these spiritual aspects to uncertainty that we try to take care of, um, which I've seen also in Spain. We have the Catholic Church, and we have all of this. So maybe uncertainty avoidance doesn't have to do that much with daily life and how we perceive like our own goals and our own uncertainty on a daily basis. Rather, it has to do with more of a things that we have not control of, and we don't really know much about how much we try to avoid or to take control over those things. I don't know, just some, maybe another insight of it. And also, like, how would you, and my question, other than that, my question would be like, if you have a high uncertainty avoidance and in a feminine society, how would you reconcile those two things, and for the sake of a more effective ministry?
Wow, that's a good question. Hmm. So just on the uncertainty again, uh, I mean, countries that like Hofstede has here with the US is that they are very low in tolerating uncertainties. And you mentioned the issue of the religious aspect, and they would have more strict rules, religious rules, and you have to do X, Y, Z. And if it's not like that, it's wrong. On a side note, you'll see that theologians from that part of the world, they are more dogmatic on their views. Whereas on the other one, they would give room to, if it's there, it's okay. I mean, there are differences. We disagree, but they will not fight for that. So if it is in try to do that in a feminine society, as you said, on masculinity. Oh, when I taught this, when I teach this course, this is one of the topics that I normally tell my students. If you have time, read it. I promise I won't ask anything about it on the exam because I don't get it myself. It's me. I study Hofstede for a long time. I read, I study and discuss with people, but that one still doesn't make sense to me.
Let me ask a question that's related to that, and I won't dive into
But before you ask your question, I don't know what Mr. Hernandez will do with the test, though. So please don't take my advice as his advice. So make sure you find out from him. You can go ahead.
I enjoy a high degree of uncertainty, so I won't tell the students what I expect in the test.
Yeah, I was going to ask it. I think it may or may not have to do with that, but do you see a lot of American style feminism moving into Suriname, or maybe it's been there for a long time, such that I don't know, maybe there's a reaction to the idea that that the position of a pastor and elder would be for men, or that women should be willing to submit to their husbands in a marriage. Do you see a lot of that? How do you handle that if you do as a minister?
I'm not sure about what's going on now, but there are definitely situations where you see it in terms of ministry where women are really prominent in what's going on in ministry, because in most of our churches we have more women in our churches than men. Actually, we have a situation, a friend from another church who is a bishop, and the bishop should provide spiritual oversight to the pastors in the church. And they have a situation right now where most of the pastors are women, but the church regulations would not allow, up to the moment, women to be bishops. And they are really uncomfortable with as men being the shepherds of a lot of women. You have to talk to them, guide them, and discuss things that women face in ministry with them. So it's a problem for them. So definitely the changes that we are seeing in society are asking for responses. Uh, for some people, it is like we have to address that, and maybe we should appoint one woman as bishop, and for all, it's no. It's if God wanted it to be that way, He would have said that way. So the influence is there, but it's you still have people who would go against it, for theological reasons.
Would you teach in your church? Do you see a need to teach the the unique roles of men and women, like in a marriage, or is that something that's, or maybe it's like some South American countries where there's still a lot of chauvinism, where the man kind of really dominates more than he should. What do you see there?
Yeah, it depends on where I am. In some, like here in the city, I would definitely teach that because, that's one of the projects that I work with the Minister of Home Affairs was on violence in homes, and then try to address that from a religious perspective. We have a high number of women that are killed in marriage because of problems at home and their husband just killed them, just like that. So we need to address that problem. And sometimes the reason is because the man is drunk, but sometimes it's because I am the boss. And if I say you do this, you do that, and you don't go out and you don't. So things like that happen. But there are other cultures, like in the interior, my own tribal background is that we are a tribe that follow the line of the mother. In that case, the women are really powerful because the father doesn't have much to say, for example, about the children. The brother of the mother, the uncle, is more powerful than the father in making decisions for the children. So in a context like that, I have to teach, the man to take a particular place and be more like the shepherd of the house and the pastor and see what they can do for their children as well, and not just for their extended family. So the culture will decide, the setting where I am will tell me what is it that I want to teach the people. Would that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So you would do your best in that situation, in that tribe where you're from. You would be intentional about teaching what we see as a biblical model of the father leading his family, as opposed to saying, well, I guess it doesn't work that way in this culture.
Correct. I would definitely teach that. And in the same time, recognizing what's there in the culture, and I'll tell you a secret, and don't tell people I told you that though. In that culture, they say, you never know for sure who the father is. You always know who the mother is. Does it make sense? And that's why that's where they are really strong at. And we've seen a lot of cases where that's definitely true.
Yeah.
So, encourage the women at the same time, but teach them how also to respect their husband and be a team together. We have situation where sometimes the wife is a Christian, but the husband is not a Christian. And in such a situation, it's so difficult because the mindset of the husband is completely opposite. You don't discuss things with the wife. She is not part of your family. You rather talk to your sister's children. So it's a challenge then to tell the husband, say, look, you have to discuss things with your wife. You have to do things because he doesn't see it that way. It will ask for a ministry in a different way than just being in church. It will be having meetings with husband. I remember what we did years ago with that is instead of doing Bible studies, well, it was Bible study, but we didn't call it Bible study, but we call it family discussions. And we would visit one of the brothers at his home, and we asked the ladies, ask your husband to come and join us to talk about family things. And we would invite the men to just share, even though they are not believers, and they give us their perspective, and then we'll try to tell them, what if, the wife would live according to the Bible? This is what the Bible is saying. Of course, when they hear the aspect of women submit to your husband, I mean, you know what happened? They are excited about that. And then say, yes, but you know what? And then go move on to the other direction as well. What we as husbands should do. And then taking it from a cultural perspective, the pride that the culture take in me being the husband. Tell them, and you see what God is telling you as the husband, you have an important role, and you should love them and provide for them and do that. So it made more sense to them, from that perspective than just tell them, okay, in this culture, you are doing things wrong. This is what the Bible tells you. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
So as pertains to individualism, how do you lead in a country or in a culture that well, I guess you've understood both cultures because you've been a leader in many different cultures with different levels of individualism. How do you lead, or how does leadership look different in a culture where the individual is valued more than the group, or vice versa, where the group dynamics valued more than the individual?
Yeah, that's an excellent question as well. When I did the sessions recently for the political parties here in Suriname, I asked them that question: what are we? Are we an individualistic society or a collectivist society? And most of them said we are individualistic. And the reason for that is that politicians, leaders of political parties, they tend to look after their own things or their people, and not so much the nation as a whole. And I've never seen it that way. I thought we were a collectivist society and we focus on doing things together, trying to look for the best of all of us. But things have changed a lot. You see more of individualism in definitely in Suriname. I don't know about the other countries in the continent, but it is more like that in Suriname at the moment. Again, even there, what I would do, I would tend to encourage people in an individualistic context to move more towards a collectivist. And then from a biblical perspective, say, together we are stronger. Actually, I use recently a story, to explain that there is a story of a Greek writer called Aesopus. And what Aesopus do is that he used uh, fables, story from the animal kingdom where animals are talking and animals are doing things. And then he has one of four uh, oxen and a lion, where these oxen were together, and when they see the lion coming, they will turn their back to each other and then their head towards different directions. So they have four directions with their horns going to those directions. So if the lion tried to attack from whatever direction, they can defend themselves. But then the lion came, and the lion started speaking to them individually and said, look at you, so beautiful.
I'm going to have to make an executive decision. I'm sure that right now he's scrambling to restart his computer or something like that. But it is already what? 10:27.
Yeah, I actually have to leave. I have class in 3 minutes.
You got places to go and classes. So let's just end the class. I'll wait for him to get back on and explain what happened and thank him for his visit. But we'll call it quits right now.
You could send him a little text message too. I don't know if you have his number or not.
Yeah,
Or if
I think I have his WhatsApp.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool. Thank you.
Will you post this recording in Schoology?
Yeah, I will. But I'm gonna edit that part he said first.
Awesome.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.